I know you're the Academy. You let me down so many times. The nominations kind of let me down, but please don't let me down and not award Parasite because I think they deserve it.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yannis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. This episode, I am honored to welcome back to the show Sade Glover. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
So tell people that didn't hear our conversation on The Farewell, and shame on them if they haven't seen that movie, because it seems like the Academy didn't really see that movie at all.
I'm really upset about that. I'm still shocked that it had 0 nominations.
I know. And I feel like that was a major point of our conversation was the Academy better pay attention to Awkwafina and Lulu Wang and Xu Zhao. And they're like, no, we're good. We'll just
I'm still shocked. It's like unbelievable. It's like upsetting, you know?
Yeah, the Academy is just like, yeah. Awkwafina, Lupita Nyong'o, Taron Egerton. Did you see this Joker movie though? We're like, yes, we did.
Yeah, when I saw Lupita wasn't nominated as well, I don't want to. This podcast, I'm assuming, shouldn't be 3 hours long, so I won't go on a whole rant about that. But it was really upsetting.
So tell people a little bit about your show, Off-Screen Babble.
Oh, yeah. Our show is a TV and movie podcast. I host it with my husband, Kyle. And we just talk about what we've been watching recently, which we tend to try to do new releases with movies and new TV shows or new seasons. Right now in January, it's kind of not many things are coming out. So I don't know if we've done as many movie reviews, but if you're looking for something, we also go into spoilers. Sometimes we'll just do like quick reviews and recommendations. But yeah, if you like quick reviews on TV shows and movies, and then listening to me and my husband sometimes argue about what the movie meant, then yeah, please listen to our show. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts.
So I have to ask you, because I was on your show to talk about Happy Death Day. So
yes,
per my recommendation, did you and Kyle actually go and watch Happy Death Day 2U?
We have not watched it yet. However, it is on our list, and it is something we want to watch.
I wanted to make sure to follow up because I was wondering that. I was like, oh, did they ever get around to that? Because
no, not yet. Because especially if we do, we would probably talk about it on the show too.
Great.
You know what I mean? Like it's something that we would want to mention. But yeah, no, that is on our list to watch because we really enjoyed Happy Death Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a really fun movie, and people should definitely check out that episode and subscribe to Off-Screen Babble.
Thank you.
Of course. Hey, that's what we do. We support each other. So, this conversation, we actually, I don't even remember when we talked on The Farewell if you had seen Parasite yet. I don't think so. I think we were both like hearing a lot about it. I think we mentioned Waves, which is an A24 movie on that episode, and we both wanted to see that. And I still haven't caught up with that one.
I did see Waves, and Waves I did not realize was going to be like, I feel like it's kind of like a controversial movie. Either I am maybe the most like mild, like in between. Like I liked the movie, but I definitely think it had flaws. Mm-hmm. But I think Waves, I've seen a lot of people who like really loved it and people who really hate it. So like, I think it's a very like either or type of movie. I think for some people, I liked it though, but I could definitely understand the criticism.
I feel like that's the nature of the world that we live in. I feel like everything is you either are so extremes. And honestly, on film Twitter, especially like we see a whole like much sharper image of how people are reacting to things and people who are praising, let's pick on it again, Joker, and people that are shitting on Joker. And I feel like it's exhausting sometimes to like everybody is like dialed up to 11 or all the way down, and it's like, let's get some more nuance in these conversations. And
I feel the same way, and it is overwhelming because a lot of times I'm like, something like The Farewell, I was like, I love this movie. I think it's great. It was my favorite movie up until another film that we're going to talk about. But like, like it was like, I was just like, it is perfect. Loved it. But if someone had said, oh, actually, I didn't like XYZ, I would have been like, oh, okay, that's interesting perspective, whatever. It is hard online when I think a lot of people are like, oh, you like the movie? Well, that must mean I didn't like the movie, therefore we're enemies now.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Or you're this, and I'm like, huh. And even like with the Joker, I am. I think when I initially reviewed it, I was kind of like, meh. Like,
yeah.
I thought the acting was good, but I don't think the movie, I thought the story wasn't really there. I kind of felt like it was more of a vehicle for Joaquin Phoenix to just act. And I like, I've been doing this podcast for over a year now. I've been posting on Instagram and Twitter about what we reviewed. We get like very little engagement on social media. Mm-hmm. I posted a just very mild, like, Joaquin Phoenix, I think his acting is really good. And, unfortunately, the plot wasn't really there. And I got like a few nasty comments, which I never get. Mm-hmm. Like, I never get comments, but to get the nasty ones, it's like, oh, what happened? And it does seem like a really like tense moment right now with media and what you like. And I think people really identify their personalities with what they like. So they think if you don't like it, therefore you're saying you don't like them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like some like professor who has analyzed all this who can like really go into depth on it. But it is really weird when you are trying to express your opinion on something. And I'm definitely open to someone not liking it. I just want to hear specifics. I just want to know like, oh, what didn't you like about it? Not, oh, if you didn't like it, you suck. And, like.
Or I'm lumping you into this, political faction or whatever.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
the big
true
thing.
As well.
I mean, yeah. And I feel like certain movies over the last few years have become huge litmus tests where like, well, if you don't like The Last Jedi, you must be, whatever, or say thing with Joker or whatever, things like that. And it's just, when you were talking about Joker, you won't be able to know this because this is an audio medium, but I was nodding heavily with everything you were saying because I was actually on this podcast called Screen Fix, and we talked about Joker, and I was the coolest of the group, and the premise of that show is that we go around naming something you would fix in the movie, like to improve it, to make it better or whatever. Okay. And so when it came to me, one of mine was the script, I guess, basically, because I agreed with everything you were saying. Like, I feel like this is, as I was watching it, and this, I don't mean for us to talk about Joker so much, but it relates directly thematically into the movie we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, that's actually true.
So, watching Joker, I'm like, okay, so he's going to go on the show. Spoilers for Joker, if you're one of 10 people that hasn't seen this $1 billion movie by now.
I know, it makes so much money. I'm sure people saw that, yeah.
And then movies like Farewell or Booksmart, or actually, good movies. Nobody goes to see them. So he's going to go on the show and he's going to shoot Robert De Niro. And then it happened. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's what I thought was going to happen. Why is that a big shocking moment for anyone? You can kind of see where it's going to go from about midway through the movie. And the movie plays up all of it like it's like, guess what? I just blew your mind. It's like Todd Phillips is gonna pop in the middle of the screen and be like, you didn't see that coming. She wasn't there the whole time. And we're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah. It's fine. I think, sometimes I always describe it as sometimes I think not just with Joker, but other forms of media, when they're really proud of themselves and they're like, see what we did there? And it's like, yeah, that's not impressive. Like, I don't know why you're like, the movie seems like it's bragging that it maybe did something rather than something like Parasite that I think is very clever and maybe a little bit more subtle. There are some things that are very obvious, but it doesn't seem smug about it versus other movies that I don't know. It is really difficult. Like I started my podcast because I wanted to start talking to people about TV shows and movies I liked, like I wanted to approach this like more on a positive side. Obviously, I know there will be things I watch that I don't like, but I'm not like I don't really want to like dunk on anything like, oh, this is a piece of garbage. Let's all laugh at, I don't want to do that. But I also don't want, I realize that people might like the things I don't like. So I kind of want to like express my opinion while also understanding that maybe it's something someone enjoyed. Like there are obviously people who really like Joker and that's fine. Like, cool. If you want me to like it, that might be a problem. But, like otherwise, I think if you like it, cool. Like it's just so weird online how tense everything can be. I definitely was not expecting that when I started. And luckily I have found people who are way more like you and I, who are like willing to at least hear people out and like have a conversation. Right. But it is a little scary when you see people like, well, if you like Joker, I guess you're dead to me. And it's like, what? Like, you know, like, okay, like this is crazy. You know?
Yeah, and there really is that dark side to film criticism where people are, I mean, you know, even if a movie doesn't work, like for me personally, Joker, or I was on another podcast talking about Cats recently, and that's a movie that does not work, but it fails like spectacularly. And I think there's a way to talk about even bad films and focus, like as you said, focus on the positive, focus on what works, or at least focus on the effort. Or critique the film without being like, this person sucks. Todd Phillips is a monster or whatever. I'm like, he's a man who made a movie. You didn't like it. It's like, whatever. It's, you know.
I will say Todd Phillips didn't help himself when he started doing like weird interviews. Like when he started talking, it was like, oh man, dude, I'm trying to help you out. But
right.
you screwed it for yourself. I don't know, you know, but like, I don't know. I just hope going forward, everyone kind of just like calms down. But who knows? I love watching the Oscars. So, and I will be honest, if Joker wins versus Parasite, I might be upset.
If Joker wins versus anything, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a garbage movie. I think there are elements of it that work. I think Joaquin Phoenix is great in it. I mean, he's a very committed actor, so you know that's to be expected. I really like the score. Certain things about the way it's shot are fine and are really well done. Best Picture though, like come on. I mean, of the nominees, it's the bottom for me of the nominees,
absolutely.
And that's just personal preference. So it's So I mean, we went on a little mini Joker tangent, but I think it bears. I think it's relevant because as Parasite was ending, I was sitting there and I think I even messaged this to you after I saw it because we had mentioned about possibly, I mentioned to you, I just saw Parasite. We need to talk about this, and you were like, yes, we need to do that. So I was like, all right, January, February, let's get that in the books because as Parasite was ending. With the commentary, the way that it talks about the class system and that dynamic between the have-nots and the haves, I was thinking to myself, like, this is what Joker thought that it was saying, but failed miserably. Like, this is what that looks like when you have a filmmaker that knows what they're doing, that understands the nuances in that conversation, that communicates it in a way that isn't self-serious, that actually has shades of dark humor to it, that's like satirical at times and makes its point without, yes, obviously there's certain elements in this movie that are so metaphorical, as the movie says a couple times. But has levels to it and has a rich story that you can dig into as opposed to, having a guy on a talk show set be like, what do you get when you take a misunderstood loner and all this? Like, you get what you fucking deserve. Like, I get it. It's hard out there for people sometimes. I understand your point. Anything else that you want to say? Yeah. No, bam. I'm like, oh, okay. Great. Yeah. Good luck with that. So obviously we're going to be talking about Parasite from director Bong Joon-ho. And I should preface that we're going to listen to a little bit of the trailer, and then after that, we're just going to go hog wild with spoilers. I mean, maybe before we cue that up, general thoughts just on Parasite before we transition into the meat of the conversation.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so my thoughts with the movie, I mean, this was my, I've never done a list my top 10 movies of whatever year. 2019 was the first time I ever did that. This was my number one, and which last time I came here, I was like, The Farewell, can't see it not being my number one, but it moved to my number two slot. I think for this movie, I went into it very, I guess, blind. I just didn't know what the movie was. If anybody who has seen the trailer, I think the trailer is also very vague, that you don't know what tone the movie is going to be. So overall, I'm trying to make my thoughts as vague as possible because I don't want, if you haven't seen the movie, I highly suggest watching it before listening to the spoilers, even if you love listening to spoilers, because I think part of the movie is going into it not knowing. You need to just let the movie kind of wash over you. But yeah, for me, I was just like so shocked by how it really hit me. I couldn't stop talking about the movie once I saw it. I think the acting performances were really, really good, which is also disappointing that I feel like the acting isn't being highlighted enough. I'm not familiar with like Korean films as well. So a lot of these actors to me are new, but I'm assuming they're famous in Korea. But I think, the actor Song Kang-ho, I believe, is the main
Mr.
dad in this. He is so honestly, everyone is good, but he is so good. And you really connect with his character for a series of reasons that happen in the movie that it kind of snuck up on me. I wasn't expecting that. There's stuff that happens with his character that really shocked and surprised me, that I'm very excited to go into detail later. But I would say I just thought it was great. I apologize that this is such like a vague, like me just saying good, great, awesome. But like, I think the movie is talking about it's talking about class, but it's talking about a lot of different things that I think when you start thinking about it can be frustrating because I don't know if the movie is actually providing like a solution. It's more just telling you this is the reality of the world we live in.
Right. And
this is how things can be unfair and why is it like that? Because of XYZ. These are the reasons, right? So for me, I loved it. I thought it was really speaking on class. I think last year, a lot of people have made this point already that a lot of the movies that were coming out last year were dealing with class. We talked about Joker, a movie like Us, even something like I really liked Ready or Not as well. Yeah, I love that.
So much fun.
Yeah, it was so fun. That, it's talking about like kind of like the 1%, the wealthy. And I think this movie is also kind of showing multiple layers. So I think you would expect like, well, the wealthy people are the villains and blah, blah, blah. But it's actually showing a more complex side to that as well. That it's just a great film. It's just a great story that they're telling. And I just can't believe that he managed to put in so many different tones in one movie. And for me, it felt very fluid. It all worked together.
Yeah, when I went to see this, I also knew nothing about it except that it was amazing, apparently. And I had seen on Twitter, the GIF of Jessica with the quote hands, Jessica,
yeah,
Illinois, Chicago, that whole thing. So I had no clue what I was in for, and like friends of mine were like commenting on my post when saying that I was watching, but like, oh, strap in, it's gonna be a wild ride. And that's why I am very also at a kind of a loss for words as far as explaining what the movie is about, because I wouldn't even know how to describe it without giving things away. It's
exactly.
I think the best way is to talk about the themes, what the movie is trying to say, and then good luck, figure it out for yourself once you enter a theater or pop it on your streaming device or whatever. But it is telling that the movie has. Song Kang-ho in particular, I think, has been getting like recognized in like some critics awards, things like that, like the smaller things. But this movie had just got the SAG award for Best Ensemble Cast, which was impressive over, I think, The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and like these other more Hollywood established productions. And everyone there, all the big Hollywood stars were loving it. Like they were like cheering them on. And it was a real it was really kind of powerful to see a foreign movie make that kind of impact over here. I don't think it's been, I mean, Roma, we saw that last year, but for the most part, I think there's Roma, there's Amor, there's Crouching Tiger. There's very few that have actually made it into the Best Picture race in the last couple decades. And I feel like Parasite is kind of inching its way up. Like, I feel like right now it's between Parasite and 1917. And
me too. And
I love both those movies. So
yeah,
fine with it.
I did enjoy 1917, but it has to be Parasite for me.
So, yeah, I mean, I think people definitely need to check this out. I wanted to ask you, because I was curious, have you ever seen any Bong Joon-ho movies prior to this?
No, I never did. And I really want to watch his full filmography. Like, this is something that after watching Parasite, I'm like, okay, he's a filmmaker I need to see. I'm giving myself so many things that are probably physically impossible to do in 1 year, but like, my husband gave me this gift that's like 100 movies you must see. And I'm like, doing that this year. That's going to be impossible to do, you know, like, and I'm like, oh, I should watch all of Bong Joon-ho's filmography. Right. I'm like, that is possible. It just might be difficult, but I do want to watch all his movies now. After this movie was so strong. Am I expecting all his movies to be the same as this? No, but I'm even okay if it's like a fraction of this. You know what I mean? Like as far as the quality goes.
Yeah, I think
so. I'm looking forward to watching his filmography.
I think general consensus is that this is kind of his masterpiece, at least to date. I had only seen Snowpiercer previously, prior to seeing this, so I kind of had an idea of his kind of offbeat, for lack of a better term, sensibility, the blending of genres, because Snowpiercer is kind of a thriller, kind of sci-fi, kind of weird comedy moments kind of scattered throughout too. And both of those films are being developed into television series, which is another interesting thing.
That is true. Yeah. Wow.
So like, Bong Joon-ho's blowing up right now. And yeah, I think it's very, very exciting to see a filmmaker like this, so distinctive, kind of making his way into the Hollywood system with a movie this strong, with, you know, this ensemble cast and saying what it does in the way that it does. So yeah, that's Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. Let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
다들 멋있다, 그치? 나 잘 어울려? 구라를 좀 치지 뭐. 부잣집 과예요. 돈도 많이 줘.
이 댁 식구들 참 잘 속아, 그지?
아버지, 저는 이게 위조나 범죄라고 생각하지 않아요.
우리도 뭔가 준비를 해야겠다.
너는 계획이 다 있구나.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Parasite from director Bong Joon-ho. So I don't even know where to start with it exactly.
Oh, okay. So
you have go for it.
I'm so sorry.
Lay it on me. No, please.
I kind of want to start with the ending only because I want to address something that I've heard people criticize about the film. So I think the ending, I was actually surprised to hear that some people interpret the ending differently. So obviously, if you've watched the movie, and again, do not listen to this if you haven't.
Yeah, please go see it. It's the best picture, hopeful winner.
Yeah, point, absolutely. So do not have this spoiled for you. But if you've seen the ending, at the end of the film, there's obviously the communication between the son and father through Morse code. And then the son is writing a letter and basically saying, you know, I'm going to become wealthy. I'm going to buy that house. You're going to come out and greet me and mom and the son, and we're going to embrace and be together again. Like that's him saying, he's like, but until then. And that's how the movie ends, right? Mm-hmm. And my interpretation is him writing the letter, but he has no way of sending it. He's writing this letter kind of wanting, but the things he's saying, one day this will happen, that's a dream. Mm-hmm. It's not an actual reality. Right. I've heard people actually interpret it as, that's what happens. And they like the film less because they're like, oh, that's too neat. And I'm like, yeah, that would be too neat, but I don't think that's what's happening. So I was curious if you interpreted it that way, or if you were kind of like me and thought, no, it's this wish of somebody who cannot achieve those things because of their class standing or where they are, no matter how hard they try. That is just not, that's something that's not going to happen to them.
Right. I think the first time I saw it, I was a little like, okay, so it's open to interpretation of how you want to see it. But then watching it the second time, it felt to me, and I even wrote this down in my notes, it felt to me very, very clearly that the message was that the Kim family is trapped in the status quo, that it's the futility of that. Like it's the kind of a beautiful dream that is, let's be realistic, probably not going to happen. It's that, and it's the futility of hope almost in that scenario. Like it's kind of heartbreaking in that way. And I didn't think of the element that you said, that how's he going to get this letter to them? That it's really, he's just kind of writing it out into the ether. But that actually makes it even more sad, even more kind of
heartbreaking.
Depressing.
Because it's like, I can believe that maybe he revisits and like gets the Morse code. How many times did he have to do it to actually get a full thing? Probably tons of time. I can believe that. But there's no way that he can actually give that letter to his father unless he broke into this place. You know, like there's no way he could do it. So Yeah, okay. I'm glad. I wanted to establish that because I was curious how you felt about the movie as a whole. And I feel like many people who maybe like the movie but don't like it as much as me view it as that's what happens. That's too neat.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like that if that was the case.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that either. I would think like, oh yeah, why did it end like that? But for me, I was like, damn, it already hurt. And now it really hurts because it just feels like that type of thing where, I think this is maybe going to be a bit of a downer, but I'm going to try to be realistic.
Okay,
I think everybody wants to achieve greatness, and I'll relate it to like the American dream, but I'm sure it's a very like global, international feeling as well as like a Korean feeling of like.
To that point, hold that thought. To that point, I think, and my wife made notice of this, that in the movie, the Parks all are like Nathan Parks, like they all have Americanized names. They all call the Kim family coming in. Oh, we'll call you Kevin. You'll be Jessica. Like it's a very Americanized South Korean household where they're learning English. Like it's very, it feels like almost the American dream has kind of seeped into this, into like the upper class South Korean, dynamic.
That, or even like, I think a lot of times when people I think America is very impactful, but still, if you're from a different place, you still love where you're from. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think in certain cultures, having something American can be like a status symbol. Not that you want to be American or anything, but it's just like an extra layer of like, oh, I also have this thing, or I also can speak English, or I got his toys delivered from the U.S.
Well, so they're really the Native American headdress, and like you see that really explicitly in the finale there too.
Yeah, but the point I was going to get to that's a bit of a downer is that like I feel like the movie is trying to say that sometimes, obviously, do we hear these like amazing stories where someone, they had $5 in their pocket, went to New York with a dream and became, I don't know, a huge celebrity and became a multimillionaire. That does happen. But the average person, no, you went to New York with $5 and then you lost the $5 and you're poor and you're living on the street. Like, it's just like, you're not like, you don't ascend to those heights. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times in your family structure, your class, you kind of stay within that system. So if you're like a middle class family, like I guess like an average for wherever you're from kind of salary, you probably will be that way for the rest of your life. You probably will meet someone in that type of circle. That's the type of lifestyle you'll live, right?
Right.
But I think for a family like the Kims, at first, it felt like their family was very much like, oh, we're hustling. We need to do this. We're scamming. Like, this is our life, whatever. But there's that moment when they're in the house and they're like dreaming. They're like, well, maybe I marry her and then we'll get this house. And then we'll, because it's this thing of like, you always want to reach for these like great heights of wealth and comfort and whatever. But it's just not going to happen for most people. And it's really depressing,
right?
Because there are people who could really use it, and I think the movie was trying to highlight that, especially with their conversations amongst themselves as a family when they were talking in the park home alone, when they were thinking like, our son is going to marry a rich girl, like they're like thinking this is going to help them achieve a higher level, and it just was not a reality.
Yeah, and the son, Kiwoo, like he's the most optimistic or I guess naive of the bunch when it comes to that, because even early in the movie when he's forging the document in order to get the job, the dad's like, "Oh, that's a great skill. We can use that." And he's like, "No, I'm not this. I don't see this as a crime. I'm going to go to this university next year. I'm just printing it out ahead of time." Like he has this whole thing framed that like, no, this is I'm just biding my time until I can actually make this dream a reality. And I think that perspective pretty much stays static throughout the the whole movie. Like that's kind of his perspective, and he he represents that idealistic young person who's like, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and I'm going to become an influencer on Instagram and I'm going to blow up.
Yeah.
And exactly. That kind of thing. So, and I feel like that's a very millennial thing.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, this person, like this is such a specific thing, but like the kombucha girl who like was on TikTok, made some random video of her reacting to kombucha, becomes like an instant meme, and is now, she lived in Texas, now moved to LA. I have no idea what her financial, like how much money she's gotten from like sponsorships in just like less than a year. Who knows how long she can keep that going, but if she invests her money well, maybe she'll be fine, you know. Like it's just like one of those things where it's like, I could react to kombucha, like I could do that, right? Like maybe that could happen to me, and it probably won't. You know, like it's just it's all luck and random with those types of situations. But I think this film is talking about more of like just how our society, or how, I guess in this case the Korean society, works. And gosh, okay. I feel like I'm getting overwhelmed even just thinking about everything that goes into this movie. But
I was gonna say, I think what makes this movie really work too is that it never really gets didactic about that. Like it's never like, don't waste your time, or you know, you could hang with it, you can make it happen. It's just kind of like, this is the reality as we see it. Take it as you will, and it's much more of not objective, but it's much more of an observant story that's being told, as opposed to, you know, this is the path to success or whatever. Like it's giving you much more slice of life than that, and I think that works to the story's credit as well.
Well, and I think that, you know, because I went to the movie not knowing anything, when the son, it's Kiwoo, right? Yeah, when he gets hired and he's using these tactics that are very like, okay, this guy is hustling. This guy is like, he knows the game and he's playing it. The way he talks to the teenage girl and he's trying to show like how he's like an authoritative figure, and these like techniques that would look impressive to somebody who's maybe not listening to what he's saying. You know, like, okay, he's doing it. And then when he gets his sister hired, I was like, okay, for me, the moment the sister is hired and she looks at she's getting a ride home, and she takes off her underwear, I was like, what is happening? And like, you see that she had the conversation with her dad, like, oh, how long did you drive? Blah, blah. I'm like, no, they wouldn't, because you already have a good thing. Two of you are hired and getting paid really well, right?
Already by dishonest means too.
Exactly. Especially when she starts going to the art therapy stuff. She's like, I just made it all up. I just looked at the thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great moment.
She was amazing. Again, the acting was phenomenal. Her character was great. But when it starts escalating, I was like, at first you're kind of rooting for them. Like, oh, this, or at least for me, I was like, oh, okay, you know what? You got to do what you got to do. You're living in a basement. That's not great. Yeah. Okay. You have to hustle and lie. Okay. I get it. But then when they got the guy fired, I was like, uh-oh, that's not great. And then the dad gets hired, and then they're like, well, how are we going to get this maid out of here? And it's like, wait, no, what? Like, and so to get their mom in, I was just shocked by that was the plan. And in the movie, they refer to what's the plan? What's the plan? So my assumption is that this isn't their first scam. Mm-hmm. This is how they've been living. So like, what's the plan? Like they mention what's the plan, like maybe the first lines of the movie.
Yeah, like Kiwoo and Ki-jong, the son and the daughter, they apparently are the master planners of this whole thing, I think.
But they keep referring to their dad as well, which I think that he is someone who, why his character really connected with me the most is that we see him at the beginning of the movie, and there's the like fumigation thing happening, and everyone's like, oh, we should close the window, and he's like, no, I'll kill the bugs. Like, he seems like, oh, you know what? It doesn't, I'm going to turn lemons into lemonade.
Right.
We'll get rid of some of our bugs. Don't worry. It doesn't seem to faze him. Right. But I think his story throughout the film is that things start to get to him. It's starting to crack at him. And obviously there is the ending point where he completely snaps because of the fact that regardless of how he's trying to just kind of roll with it, he realizes like, man, we're never going to get out of this. This is just, they're always going to look down at us. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter. I look at the situations we're in, you know, like this is always going to keep happening. And then on top of that, having someone insult you with like, oh, those people, how they smell, like all that stuff. I think it just got to him and he cracked. And it's just very interesting because I was not expecting that from his character, because at the beginning he was so like, you know what, fumigation, it's good for you, you know, like it's fine, we'll be fine, like it's totally okay. And then to him, like when I know I'm going all over the place. I apologize.
But it's hard not to.
Yeah, that scene when they're when they think they're alone. We'll have to rewind to get into how this happens. But when they think the Park family, the husband and wife, when they think they're alone and they're on the couch and they smell the couch and they're like, oh, you know, it smells like those people, like the types of people who like take a subway or Mr. Kim, like those people. And you could see on his face that look. Mm-hmm. At first it looks kind of comical, like he's like sniffing his shirt or whatever. But you could kind of see like it's heartbreaking. He's kind of like, damn, like, wow, like I'm not even doing anything. And you're referring to me as this like less than person because of the smell, because it's not the wealthy smell or whatever, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just his character, I just connected with him the most since he goes through such a transition.
Yeah, and Mr. Park throughout the movie numerous times will say, oh, you know, this guy, he doesn't cross the line. Like there's a very clear division between you and who you are and your place, and you stay in your place, and I'm, you know, I ride in the back seat, you drive, you open my door, and you cook you have my ramdon made in 8 minutes before we get home, and you know have to deal with that. Like it's the level of privilege that the Parks are dealing with that they're completely oblivious to, where they have this impromptu party that's nicer than any party I've ever had, and they're just like so casual about it. Oh, we'll just have these people do everything for us, and it's not realizing it's in it. You know, that's the big question. You hear like all the time, like. In the title of a movie, and it has numerous meanings. Like in this movie, who is the parasite? Which one is the parasite? Because everybody's it's like, you know, everybody's feeding off of each other, basically.
Yeah, I was watching the extra, like there was an extra Q&A thing on the digital copy of Parasite because I bought it immediately, of course, and it was from, I think, Fantastic Fest, and in the Q&A, someone asked like, what do you mean by parasite? What is the title referring to? And Bong Joon-ho had, you know, many things to say, but one thing that was interesting is that he's like, well, obviously you probably think the poorer family are parasites. They are going after things. And I guess in Korea, the title is like way more controversial there because it's the word parasite is very connected to people, I guess, who are poor. And so like, it was a little bit like a questionable title there. But he also mentioned that, you know, the Park family is also leeching off of the labor of the Kim family. Like they are relying, like they can't drive, they can't cook, they can't clean, you know, like they're relying on them to educate their children, to do all these things, to function for them, so that they can keep moving on and maintaining their status. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting, because I didn't even begin to think about how the Park family is represented in the title. I was just thinking about the Kim family. But yeah, you're right. It can't, the way you interpret the title alone can mean multiple things.
And then you have, you know, the old housekeeper and her husband in the basement. And the way that they're parafeeding off of them, like that's like on my second viewing, I actually enjoyed the movie a lot more because I was able to set aside all the hype that I had been built up on film Twitter. Like I was like, okay, movie, lay it on me. And it's like, okay, that was really good. And then seeing it the second time, I was like, wow, there's a lot more to this that I didn't even see the first time. And it kind of, to go back to, we mentioned Us earlier, you see how the two sides of the coin here are sort of, to borrow a term from that movie, tethered together, and how it's like depending, you know, who has the upper hand kind of shifts based on the situation, I guess, based on the way you want to look at it. And I think the movie captures that well, in that when it starts off, like as you're saying, you start off on the side of the Kim family. You're like, okay, cool, good for them. They're hustling, they're making it happen. And then you start to shift. You're like, wait a minute, I don't know. Maybe I'm on the Parks family side. This is kind of shady. Now they're using like peach fuzz and they're like all this other stuff. We'll have to get to the what is it, Moon Gwang and her husband in a second.
Yeah.
But you know, and then it just kind of shifts back and forth to you get to the point where they are under the table and they're on the sofa, like you were saying. And not only are they sort of mocking his smell, but then they're literally, and this I noticed even more so the second time, they're literally fetishizing the poor, where he's like, hey, do you have those cheap panties? She's like, oh yeah, you're going to buy me drugs? And it's like, ooh, look how dirty we are. We're like these other like nasty people that we you know what I mean? It's like a whole other level of disrespect than what was already happening.
Yeah, that was actually very shocking, because at first, when they think their driver may have had sex in their car or whatever, they're like, why would someone do this? Like, oh, it's disgusting, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can't believe whatever. And then cut to them
they're
like,
kind of into
basically role playing it, because they're like, well, it's kind of hot, right? Like, you know, like, just like, wait a minute, you just fired someone over this, and you are making it into something that I guess like kind of objectifying it. It's just, yeah, that scene is wild. Like, it's just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, to go back to talking about the lead up to, I guess, the major turn of the movie, you know, when they get the maid, what was the maid's name?
Moon Gwang. It says
Moon Gwang.
I have it up here.
Yes. When she is fired, well, first, the elaborate, like, okay, she's allergic to peaches, so we're going to make sure to time everything. Like, when I'm talking about it, it sounds so ridiculous, but the movie is able to execute it so smoothly. Like, you know, Mrs. Park coming up the stairs and in shock, seeing her cough, and then Mr. Kim picks up the Kleenex that he puts hot sauce on that looks like blood. Like, all that, me just saying it sounds crazy, but the way it's done in the movie, it's like, wow, they pulled it off.
It's like some kind of Ocean's 11 style situation where you're like, I don't like what they're doing, but you know, respect for pulling it together, I guess.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Like, you really pulled something together that is ridiculous, but you did it. And so, yeah, when she's fired, so for me, I was like, where is this movie going? Because I wasn't expecting anything that had happened at that point. And we see her leave the home and she keeps looking back. And I'm thinking, oh, that's so devastating. Obviously, she's worked there for so long. She's probably just so shocked that she's fired. And, oh, that sucks for her. Maybe she'll come back asking for her job or something, you know. But then when she does come back, and it's so, okay. All right. So when the Park family leaves and they're like, oh, we're going to go camping for our son's birthday. We don't stay in the house. Ever since his last birthday, he had a seizure. He was so scared he said he saw something. I'm like, oh, that's horrible. I'm not even thinking about anything else. Just like, oh, that's horrible. Then the Kim family is just straight up having a party. And it gets so messy. I was stressed by how messy they made the home within seconds. Like, within seconds, they're like, oh, well, let's just throw bottles around. Let's just like throw all the garbage around. Who cares? And that's the moment where they're talking about, like, oh, isn't this nice? Imagine, what if you get married to her? Like, they're starting to fantasize about, what if this was our home? That would be great, wouldn't it? And like, I think even the son goes to his sister because she's like taking a bath to give her some water. And he later reflects on, like, you look like you belong here. Like, you know, like, we could do, like, imagine how, like, that luxurious this would be if this was our lifestyle, like, every day. That whole moment was really, like, I was starting to get very tense because I was like, what is going to happen? Are they going to come back and catch them? Or are the Kim family planning to kill the Park family? What is going to happen? Like, I just had no idea. So then when the maid comes back and you kind of can see her face through that like TV monitor thing that they have, but she looks bad. It's like, oh, I I straight up thought, oh, this is like a supernatural horror film. She's here to kill all. Like I thought something like that was about to happen. Like that was going to be the twist.
She has like a machete behind her back or something.
Exactly. I thought that was something bad. And instead, when she comes in, she's like, oh, I forgot something. And I'm thinking, what? This is a lie. She's lying. When they cut to, I should talk about like the cinematography is amazing in this film.
Yeah.
As well as like the production design. When they cut to her in the basement trying to move the shelving unit thing, that was terrifying because for a second, at least for me, maybe I'm alone, I thought she was levitating. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. And then I'm like, oh no, she's using the force to like move the shelving unit. Everything that happens after that is so shocking. Like there's a hidden basement because and it all feels like, yeah, I guess that would make sense. The architect who lived there before would be maybe slightly embarrassed that he created like a doomsday bunker just in case something happened with North Korea, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this elaborate way going down the stairs, and her husband's there, and he's been there for, I guess,
like 4 years, weeks? I think. Yeah. Yeah. 4 years, but also weeks since without her being in the house, I guess.
And then she's trying to feed. It's just, and that moment when she is trying to say like, please, like, sis, understand, and then Mrs. Kim's like, don't call me sis. Mm-hmm. Like, no, I have no sympathy. And she's looking down at her. To talk about this movie, when I reviewed it, I kept saying the word symbolism. I'm trying not to say it like too much, but this movie is very symbolic because there is a lot of stuff to do with like height. Like the Parks live up on a hill. The Kims live literally like below the ground. A lot of times when they're speaking to one another, whoever's in power is looking down at the person who isn't. And so in that scene, when Mrs. Kim is looking down at her, it's like, wow, can't you sympathize? Like you're in a similar situation. You can't just like, or have some empathy. Like I hear what you're saying, grab your things and go, or like, I'm not going to call the police. But instead she's like, I'm going to call the police, blah, blah, blah. And then when her family falls into frame, and the power shifts and she has her phone and records it. And then now they're on the ground and she's looking down at them, or at least kind of.
Right.
That whole moment was just amazing. Just how things changed within like 3 minutes of the film. And I was so shocked. I had no idea that's where this movie was going to go. And we get like a little glimpse of, they've lived there for 4 years. And I guess this seems like a very specifically Korean thing as far as like the loan shark thing. They had to escape somewhat. I guess at least I think I heard this, that in Korea, it's very it's a lot of people are having financial trouble because they all opened up these specific types of shops, like cafes or something. And then because there was too many, they all went out of business, or a lot of them went out of business. Right. And then they had to use like loan sharks, and it's just like people are having like horrible financial situations because of this. And that's what I guess the maid and her husband are going through. But they seemed happy. And they're dancing together, and and then it's just sad that like he seems to have lost his mind a bit, being down there for so long.
Respect.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that whole thing, the way the phone was used also like as a threat, like if you move, I will just send this video. And they'll know that you lied, that you're like, like.
It's just like you said, like we start the movie and first there's stink bugs, which kind of feels like it's a parasite symbolism as well.
Yes.
And then, the Kims are using the Parks, and then now they're in some position of power just minutes after Mrs. Kim was saying, oh, she's just nice because she's rich. And, that whole dynamic, that whole question of, well, are you a nice person because you're rich? Or, how does that whole thing work? The privilege that they have. And then they have a little bit of power. And the first thing Mrs. Kim does is exert it on Moon Gwang and her husband and be like, no, you people, you're in that. We live in a sub basement, but you live in an actual basement. So we're above you at least. And the shift in tones, like you sort of alluded to already, like we go from kind of a domestic drama with them in there in the living room having a conversation about class and, oh, maybe we could live here, whatever. Then a horror movie where they go down the stairs, and then the three of the Kim family have like a pratfall down the stairs.
Yeah.
And then it shifts into a thriller. So it's like within a span of 5 minutes, they hit like 3 or 4 different genres. And yeah, I mean, it's such a great sequence. And the way that, as you said, the way that it's shot and everything, it's just, there's so much to dig into just in that one sequence alone that I wonder if there's a commentary or something that's going to be on the Blu-ray, because I would definitely want to hear more what Bong Joon-ho has to say about all of this, because it's so well, like, brilliantly constructed, just the way that whole thing goes on. And then the way that the film ends with Mr. Kim, they gambled everything on the Park family and it backfires, and he actually goes from the sub-basement to the basement himself, that he's in a worse position than he was at the beginning of the movie. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, that is wild. And I think that, the moment where things escalate, where it's obviously like, okay, we got the upper hand and now we're putting them back in the basement, and I had to make this Ramdon noodle thing really quick and somehow hide all the garbage that we did, and everyone's hiding underneath that table. That whole moment is just so tense, and you're pretty much tense, I think, until the Kim family can leave the house. And then it's kind of like, well, what do you do? And I think even the son asked his father, like, what's the plan? Yeah. And eventually, there's that horrible storm that's happening, and their community is flooded, which I also learned that for production, everything was a set, apparently. And so that like community was built into like a huge pool area so that they could flood it later for that scene. And I thought, like, wow, that's crazy, because that looks like a real location. Yeah. It does not look like a set at all. But yeah, when their home is flooded and they have to sleep in that place where everyone is sleeping, and he looks to his dad's like, what's the plan? And his dad's like, there's no plan. The best plan is no plan, because you can't be disappointed with no plan. Yeah. Because he's like, do you think it was everyone's plan to be here in this gym? No, but it happened. And so there's no plan. And it kind of seems like that's the beginning of the end for his character, because he's given up. What was making him move forward was always having a plan, always looking on the bright side, always trying to manipulate it to work in his favor. And I think at that moment, he's like, no, it's over. It's just, I've heard what they've said about me. I realize where I am. I can't, there is no plan. I can't spin this to be a positive. Right. That was really interesting to me. So when they go back and Mrs. Park is like, oh my gosh, the rain was amazing. We sometimes just need that. Like, and she's just talking about how it was a positive thing for her because she lives up on the hill. It's probably nice and sparkly and whatever. Not having any knowledge of knowing like the Kim family, that was horrible for them. Their home is flooded. Everything they had in there is probably ruined. Like it's just like such a difference in the lifestyles that they're living. And then she does the smell thing and he can see it. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's just like one thing after another. So that when it finally escalates to that party, it's obviously he shouldn't have killed the guy, but you almost understand, like, yeah, he snapped. Because what was he supposed to do once he's like trying to save someone and he can't handle the smell of this man because he lives in a basement, like, well, yeah.
The whole movie, he's telling his son and his daughter, and he's like, oh, we, like you were saying, the optimism, like, we could do this. It's like, oh, Kiwoo, you totally, I don't know why you're not in school. Like, you're so smart. And look at what Ki Jong can do. It's like, it's hard out there, but we're going to get our chance. And that's the moment where he's like, I guess not. I guess there is no chance. This is my lot in life. And then, at the party, and he hasn't put on the headdress. And basically he's like, oh, okay, I'm Mr. Park's dancing monkey now is what's going on. That's the situation here. It's obviously, as you were saying, we're not like, sure, kill the guy. He has it coming. But the movie does a good job of making us at least empathize with him. Like, we understand where it's coming from, and it's a lot more complicated than just black. It's not black and white. Let's put it that way. And I it's not for Mr. Kim either. Like as soon as it's done, he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry, Mr. Park. And then he's saying like to himself in the basement. And, it's just one of those things where he just lost control and it happens. Watch the news. Shit like this happens a lot. Maybe not in this dynamic or in this craziest scenario, but it's like, life takes its toll on people. And I think this movie does a good job of conveying that.
And I think another moment that actually sticks out to me that I got some clarity watching that Q&A thing, when the son is talking to his now girlfriend, which is that's a whole other dynamic that like, I didn't realize that it seemed like he was kind of mimicking his friend, Min, the guy who gives him the rock at the beginning and says that it'll bring him wealth. And then immediately he's like, oh, I like this girl, so you can teach because I know you're not going to do anything, right? Which seems like already kind of a dig, like, well, I'm better than you. So like, clearly nothing's going to happen between you and my girlfriend, right? And then something immediately happens. But that scene where it's towards the end when he asks her like, hey, do I fit in? Do I look like everybody else? Do I fit into this crowd? And she answers kind of like, yeah, like not really thinking about it. I guess Bong Joon-ho is like, she's naive. She's never experienced anything outside of her bubble. Right. So of course like, she would.
Yeah. She's like, fit in where? What do you mean? I don't know. It's just whatever. It's all good. This is, like she has no concept of that there are people in different situations than her.
Yeah. So that question alone is like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, of course, like whatever. I think that's just so interesting because I think he wants to try and make things better. The connection with The Rock is a whole other thing because he takes The Rock down there and then obviously there's a turn because the guy gets a hold of it and smashes his head with it. Like I thought he was dead. I was shocked that he lived after that. I thought she was. And so, yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I'm just so, it's hard to even continue to talk because I'm just like, I don't know how to express how many layers the film has that I think even us, like as much as we're dissecting the film, I'm sure if you're Korean, like you see other things because there was an element that I don't know if you picked up on this where Mr. Kim is talking to Mr. Park like, well, you love your wife, right?
Oh yeah. I picked up on
and he asked that more than once. And I was like, what? I never understood what that was referring to or what he was trying to imply with that. But it always felt so awkward because Mr. Park's reaction was always like, well, what's love?
He's like yeah, we'll call it love.
Yeah, it was always like, whoa, what's that about? But I'm sure maybe someone can understand that who maybe it's like a cultural thing. I'm not quite sure.
I think that there are obviously more layers than we're even mentioning here. I think you see a little bit with that with Daesung, the boy, the supposed art prodigy. His sister is like, he's faking it, right? He just wants attention. So in a way, like he's using the situation to his advantage. So he's a parasite. And then it's like, Mr. Park and like, maybe he's more physically attracted to his wife. Maybe he's got a girlfriend on the side. We don't know that he's like with her, but he gets something out of the relationship. So he's like, is it love? I don't know. It works for me. I get what I want. She likes to role play on the sofa apparently with like somebody's gross panties. So it's like, he's like, yeah, I don't know. I get what I need from it. I don't know. It's a little. What really struck me this time watching it was that I keep going back to the party because I think that the party is so telling, the contrast, as you were saying, with the reactions to the rain. And, them in the beginning of the movie folding pizza boxes and trying to like, oh, well, we need to, get enough money to buy food. And then like trying to get the corners of the house to get a Wi-Fi signal so they could check their WhatsApp or that great image that really stood out to me both time of Ki Jong sitting like in that toilet area where they were using for the internet and is like, sewage or whatever coming out of the toilet while it's like the whole place is coming down. She's just sitting there smoking, just like, well, this is how my life works. And then you get the next morning to the Park's house and Mrs. Park is like, oh, can you put these tables out and put them in a crane's wing formation? And oh, this is Daesung's trauma recovery cake. And meanwhile, these people are like, I just got to pay my bills. And they're everything with the parks is so about artifice, about just wasteful, over the top, and completely ignorant to anything less, basically. And I think that it's hilarious, the level of again, that's the dark comedy coming out of it. It's hilarious how the level to which Mrs. Park gets into this party, and the details and how they contrast with what the Kims are going through, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, to speak about their son, the Park son, like when you realize that the painting or the drawing that he made had little like eyes, and you're like, what? And it's like, oh, that was the man coming up to get like food or something. And like, it's just like, oh my gosh. So that's why you guys have been leaving for his birthday, because he saw the guy who lives in the home. And like, that is terrifying. Of course you'd be scared. It's just like, oh, I can't believe it. And then the whole like Morse code thing, that was like another layer that I wasn't expecting, that this guy, because he seems to have kind of lost it a bit, is trying to communicate subtly with Mr. Park. Because he respects the home and he's trying to give him respect because he's like, wow, that whole thing was just like, okay, what is happening? You know?
Yeah, he's like, it's like a worship thing for Mr. Park. He's like, he provides me with things and
And then we see Mr. Kim kind of do something similar, it seems like, towards the end. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is that, like, I feel like for the beginning of the movie with Min, the friend who brings the rock that is supposed to symbolize wealth, right?
Right.
It's almost, I apologize because I haven't fully thought out this thought, but it is saying something about how, I'm not going to say he's irresponsible, but it's almost like he doesn't realize, maybe because he's in a different status level a little bit from his friend, like bringing this type of scam to them.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like sometimes you don't understand, like somebody who's in a different situation telling them about something is going to get their hopes up. If that I hope I'm making sense, but like
about do you mean about the rock specifically, or about the about
the scam, about the tutoring?
Yeah.
So okay. I think he's bringing a situation that he assumes they can handle, but doesn't realize that this is going to be like only the beginning for them, and they're going to keep taking advantage. They're not just going to do the tutoring; they're going to try to infiltrate this home.
Yeah.
Yes. So like you probably don't realize this because you're not as poor as them. So you don't think they would really need to do that. So you're dangling this thing in front of them that they're obviously going to clamor at. It's not just like, oh, thanks for the opportunity. It's like, okay, we're taking over, type of mentality. And
I think Min knows that the Kims are all about that. Like that's their thing. I feel like he's a more casual friend than that.
Yes, but I also feel like it's saying something about people who are oblivious to other people's situation.
Okay, yeah.
But I just haven't completely formatted that thought, so that's why I'm like saying it with like a question mark at the end.
Right.
Because I'm kind of like, I feel like that's a little bit where it's going. Like the whole thing with the friend, it's just like, it's just very interesting, especially because it's like, how are they friends? Like, where did that?
Yeah, start? I know. I was wondering that too. And it's another layer of Min using
exactly
Kiwoo. He's again, he's a parasite feeding off of Kiwoo. He's like, well, my friend, he's desperate. He'll take this job. He's like, he's not of the same level as me. Dahai is not gonna be into him. Whatever, it's all good. And then immediately, that doesn't work out so well. But yeah, everybody in this movie is using everyone else, and that is essentially the thing. And I think the movie, it's just a microcosm of our society. And another movie, Knives Out was another one I thought about too for the class thing.
Oh yeah.
But Hustlers too, which is kind of touches on, that's the whole thing where Jennifer Lopez says towards the end, where she's like, there's people dancing and there's people, paying, or whatever she says, something like that. That's like every relationship on a grand scale is a matter of give and take. You're either being used or you're the user. And
I think she's equating society as a strip club.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
I think. And I think that's very true. That's kind of what this movie is tackling as well. If you are naive, you will definitely be taken advantage of, like Mrs. Park, who I think at the beginning of the film, you almost think, oh, she's going to be kind of tough to convince, but she's so gullible. She believes, she's so naive that she's taken. I'm sure she's taken advantage of in other ways that we couldn't even imagine because, we didn't see in this film.
Well, there's a man hidden in her basement that she doesn't know about. So that's one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that major element there. But yeah, no, I agree that the movie is probably very similar to a lot of films of last year that were tackling this topic, saying the world and how we structure our society, how we view people, it's going to create this obviously unfair balance that the people who are at the bottom are not going to want to stay at the bottom. Why would they? They're at the bottom. They don't have as much. They're going to try to climb up to the top, and they can't do it honestly. So they have to scam their way through it, and I think that's why as an audience, you kind of, you understand where the Kim family is coming from, at least to a certain point.
Right.
And for me, the turn was when the maid was fired.
Yeah, the peaches start coming out, and you're like, oh wow.
Yeah, that was when the peaches are used as a weapon later in the movie. It's what is happening? But yeah, you can understand somebody's fight. I'm not saying I would run a scam. However, I guess if I was pushed to it, if I felt there's no other way, you're doing what you can, what you need to survive,
right.
and feel like a human being, because I think that's the worst part, that the Kims, they're hustling and they were trying to take it as a positive thing, but they were viewed as lower than human. I guess parasites. They were viewed as literally they're not people, and that's heartbreaking. It's just really sad, and I can see why someone would eventually snap from that.
Right, which is why it's so it's so key that the movie starts in their home, so you see the kind of squalor that they're in, where there's people outside peeing in an alley, and the fumigation. You see the terrible conditions in which they are barely scraping by. And so for those, like you said, for the first it's actually 50 minutes in that the whole family is entrenched in the house. I think you're kind of on their side for maybe the first half hour of that until the peaches start coming out. But I think in Mrs. Park's defense, they're really good at this. Kiwoo and his talented. whole oh, what you need is vigor, that whole thing, and then Ki Jong and her whole sales pitch about how she owns the space, and she's I will not be interrupted in my lesson. I was just wow, she's so confident. I'm convinced of this, and I know what's going on. And just the way that I was really kind of to the whole point of the Ocean's 11 of it all in this movie, which there is kind of an element of that here in the first half. The way in which that they play Mr. and Mrs. Park off of each other really blew me away. The way that they tell, they tell her about, they tell Mrs. Park about the whole thing with the housekeeper and how she's got tuberculosis, but she's oh, but, I shouldn't mention this to my husband. So really, they only have to sell one person on this scam. They don't have to convince the world. Yeah. It's not going to be exposed. And then when it comes to the driver, well, actually, kind of leading up to that, Mr. Kim gives him the business card, and he's oh, don't even mention me. Don't worry about it. She's oh, good point. He's I'll make myself look like the heroic husband. So it's they kind of cordon off their the layers of their scam to work that that dynamic of that disconnect between Mr. and Mrs. Park that's clearly in the movie. And like they take advantage of the marital, situation in that house.
Yeah, whatever their dynamic is, they are able to manipulate it. And that manipulation, I guess, like, because when I first left the movie, when I saw it the first time, I was talking to my husband. I'm like, are the Kims good people? Like, I was kind of simplifying it. I'm like, are they good or bad? And then I was kind of like, well, I think at the end of the day, this film is just about how complex everything is. And I think the Kim family, it's not even about them being good or bad or whatever. I think they were just people in a situation where they felt like, we have to do what we need to do to survive. So if we need to manipulate someone's marriage, we will do that. Right. And we will take the opportunity to mislead one person, and then they'll talk to the spouse or whatever. Like, it seems like they were very much aware, like, because I was kind of like, they didn't even seem to feel bad about what they were doing. But it's like, why would they? Because it's like, they need to survive. They're like, this is what we need to do. And then, I guess it's a little bit of greed. They were like, well, if 2 people are working in there, why not all 4 of us?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then they have that conversation where the Mr. Kim sitting around with like the amount of money that's coming out of that house into ours. It's yeah. And here's the other thing. Like, we don't know. I guess we don't know how much time has passed between when all of them get their jobs and, later in the film. But it doesn't. This is the other thing that kind of struck me. It doesn't seem like they're particularly interested in improving their situation. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're making this money, but yet you don't see them like moving into a different place or like, maybe getting cleaning shit up or like, they're just like, we're just gonna stay here. What are they doing with all the money that they're making? If they're not, you know what I mean? I'm assuming it's just maybe too small of a period for that to really come to fruition, or they're being paid so little, but to them it's still worth it. I'm not exactly sure. They get access to the house at least. And the movie does a good job. Obviously that's a really cool, really impressive house. And I think that's important. If it wasn't a house that us, the viewer, were like, well, shit, I want to live there too. I think, it wouldn't work. The movie wouldn't hold together the same way. It has to be an object of envy for the viewer as well as the Kims, so we can see it through their eyes. And I think, I think that the movie, the house is befitting of that. And it makes sense that they would aspire for something more akin to what the Parks are living.
Yeah, and as far as the amount of time that goes by, my assumption is just that, one, it was brief. Like, I think it's only been like maybe a few weeks, maybe less than like 2 months. I don't know. And I think also there is something to say that regardless, you would think like, oh, if you're getting into money, maybe we should like do some financial planning and like figure out like, okay, how long you think that conversation would at least start to happen, even if you haven't made that much money. But I think for them, they're very much like, well, one, they're very much of the moment. Like they're not thinking about their future, which I think is also a class thing because, I think this is going to be a random reference, but I recently watched Set It Off for the first time. And in that movie, there's a character that's talking to this like wealthy guy who's talking about like, what's your 5-year plan? Like, where are you going to be in 5 years? And she's like, I haven't thought about that, because she's in like kind of a different financial standing than him. And so then she asked her friend, who's also not wealthy, like, what do you want to do in 5 years? And her friend's like, I'm not thinking about 5 years. I'm thinking about right now. Right. I can't think about the future like that. That's not a luxury I have. I have to think about how I'm going to pay my bills today. I have to think about what I need to do today. And I think many people who are poor, who are kind of living like paycheck to paycheck, like this whole like, you should save your money and like figure out what you're going to do. It's like, no, that's cute. That's a great idea. I would love to do that. I don't have the luxury of doing that. And so I think for the Kim family, they might be in a situation, since they've always been in the situation, where the idea of like, what place do we want to move into? And like, maybe we should like get some storage containers and like clean up the place. I don't even think they're like even beginning to think of that, because they're just like, no, we need to like do this hustle. And then their dreams become more inflated as time goes by. Yeah, so that's how I took it. It
just feels like they just buy in on the fact that, well, we're just gonna keep infiltrating this house until we got like, yeah, they fixate on the house, and it's almost like,
yes,
like they cling to the, I don't know if I'm reaching here, but it's like they cling to the house the way that Ki-woo clings to that rock at that in the climax of, like, right before the climax of the movie, like when they're in the rain and stuff, and he's like looking for it and he's like holding on to it, like that's him clinging on to hope. And so they're clinging to this house, like this is their their way out, basically. And so I think they have such blinders on to any other options that they're just like, no, this house, this is it. This is what we're doing. This is our big scam. This is our, like, after this, we're going to go straight kind of thing. So I don't think they really entertain any other options.
Yeah, I agree. And like to go back to the ending, because I know we started with the ending, but the connection between the family and the father, and that the father is separated from them, which I really think the father was like the thing holding the family together, like because he was always so positive, because he always had a plan. The fact that, the sister dies, and at the end we see the son, he's severely brain damaged and seems to have like awkward laughter
Joker
reactions.
Disease. He has Joker disease.
Whatever the Joker has. Yeah, he's developed now. And it kind of seems like, who knows if they're still like hustling and scamming by the end of the movie, especially because they have a little bit of surveillance on them because of the police. But it just feels like there's a huge missing heart of the family because the dad is not there,
and the sister too. The only one who had
and the sister,
the only one who apparently had acting experience, as they mentioned during that conversation there.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. When they're rehearsing, they're like, wait, let's tone it down. Like, it's
he's
so
like, you're up
funny.
to here. I need you up to over here.
Yeah,
yeah, that was great.
Yeah, but yeah, I think the ending is like, wow, this family is. It's not that the family had much hope to begin with, but it's truly over now because the dad is not part of it anymore, and he's trapped. And like, the dad is in a situation where, like, if he were to, he can leave the home, right? But if he were to do that, he'd be arrested. Where is he supposed to go?
Right.
Like, he can't just like roam the streets because the incident made news. It seems like everyone in the country would know who he is. So he's trapped unless he's ready to go to jail. And the family's kind of trapped because they don't have the person who was really like guiding them through their plans, like guiding them through what they're going to do to survive. So it's just him and his mom. And it seems like just really, really sad at the end. And, it's hard because I think I mentioned earlier, the movie is not trying to come up with a solution. It's not trying to say like, and therefore we all should, disperse our wealth. And, it's not doing anything like that. It's just saying like, yeah, this is reality. This is what happens. This is how people view each other, and how wealth really impacts your standing and your class, like how you're going to be viewed by society. So, yeah.
The fact that the Kims, like, as I sort of mentioned earlier, but the Kims aspire to something more, and instead they end up in like basically sort of a social chutes and ladders where they try to get up and then they slip back below, even lower than they already were, to the point that they are those people that they were looking down on in that, that pivotal sequence early in the middle of the movie. And of course it's, Mr. Park pinching his nose that ultimately sets him off in that climax, which again, as we said, it was really well threaded. That's just like, that's where the movie, I mean, there's a sequence in the middle of the film, obviously, with Moon Gwang and her husband and that revelation. There is the moment that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, because it's one of the biggest gasp moments in the movie, when Mrs. Kim just like casually kicks her down the stairs. And you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like she is she is clearly the least optimistic, the most bitter of the Kim family. But from her perspective, I mean, look at the situation. One of them is making out with a teenager while he's teaching her English. The other one is just pretending that she knows about art. One is driving a fancy car around, and she's like chopping up sirloin and like stirring things and like cleaning. Like she's got all the nitty gritty, like physical labor basically of the group. So it kind of makes sense why she would be like, no, screw this. she's not going to mess this up for me. I've gotten this far. I'm not slipping down to her level. I'm going to kick her back down to the basement where she belongs, below me, below where I've ascended to, basically. And I think that's a really shocking moment. And that sequence, that moment, and then the ending where it just goes full horror movie, where there's the skewer with the sausages on it and all of that. It's just, it's complete bananas where this movie ends up. But it's like you said, it somehow all fits together, this crazy tonal, like, I don't want to say mishmash because that implies that it doesn't fit together, but it's like somehow he amalgamated all these different genres. And the movie is both heartbreaking and kind of thrilling and depressing, but also kind of hilarious in moments. It's the full cinematic experience, basically. So which is why if it was to win Best Picture, as I'm increasingly hoping it does, I would be fine with that, because it's another, it's a movie that is very, very relevant to this current moment as far as everything that it's saying. It's a movie that would break boundaries. Like, I don't think there's ever been a foreign language film that's won Best Picture. If I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, but I know it's
been a long time if there is.
Yeah, it's rare if it has. So yeah, it would be like a historical moment.
Right. And it gives you everything you want in a movie. Like, it has moments of every genre pretty much you can think of. And it's one of those films that has 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like one of those movies that pretty much, like, it's hard to not like. It's hard to not find this movie, get something out of it, even if it's not necessarily your genre, assuming you can label this particular genre, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, thinking about the other nominees in the category, it's just that I just think this movie is so unique for everything that you just said, because it's able to meld everything together so seamlessly and like everything is so fluid and smooth. Like, even like to go into that kick that you referenced, I feel like another filmmaker would like zoom into the wife and you could see her hesitation and like whatever, like it'd be like a whole thing. But in this movie, it's just like, nope, boop, I'm kicking you and I'm keep walking and I'm doing, like, it's just like, and I think that even that action alone, you could like probably dissect into a whole other thing about why was it so easy for her to do that and just keep moving and like whatever. So yeah, for me, when we talk about Best Picture, I just feel like if we're really, I know there's always an argument of like, oh, do the Oscars actually matter and blah, blah, blah. But like, I really do think that it's important to try to dissect art and media in different ways. And I think this movie is such a good movie for that. And I think it's really saying a lot. It's so impressive. I'm sure there are people who do not like the movie. I have not heard those people, but I'm sure someone's like, it's not my type of movie. But I'm assuming they can appreciate what the movie is doing, at least. And I just, like, out of all the nominees, I just feel like to me, it is the Best Picture. I think it will definitely win, like, international film.
Oh, yeah, for
like,
sure.
Best International. But, like, I really, like... I'm not trying to be greedy, but I really think it deserves, like, everything that it's nominated for. And I think it should have been nominated for more. And I just, so for me, I'm with you. I think it's definitely Best Picture worthy. And I guess we'll see soon when it actually happens if they win.
Yeah, I for me with Best Picture, like, I always evaluate that, like, in which nominee I'm rooting for based on a variety of factors. But ultimately, it feels like this is the movie industry. This is Hollywood saying this movie represents the best of what we had this year, thematically, whatever, things like that. And I feel like this reminds me a little bit of the 2017 Oscars, where it was La La Land and Moonlight. And like, okay, La La Land is a great movie. It's a very well made, very well acted, whatever. But it's a throwback film. It's like this making a Hollywood musical with a modern context, but it's really well done. So it's your more traditional Best Picture winner. It's like, we love Hollywood. We love the movie. Look at the magic of the movies, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then Moonlight is like, but we're going to Moonlight's telling a story that hasn't really been told ever, in a way that it's never really been told. From a filmmaker, how many movies have you seen where there's 3 actors in different periods playing the same character? And it's, an African-American gay man coming to terms with his identity, his sexuality, his relationship with his mother, and all this other stuff. And I feel like, you know, those two movies are both excellent in completely different ways. But when that happened and La La Land supposedly, air quotes, won, I was like, okay, La La Land, that's good. I love Moonlight. That was a great movie. I like it. But then when Moonlight won instead, I was much happier because that's the Academy taking a stand on diversity, on, you know, representation, what kind of stories we want to see told, the kinds of you know, visionary filmmakers that we want out there, like pushing things forward, like progress in cinema and in culture. And I think this year feels very similar in a way. Like you can go to, as I said, the two front runners in my mind are 1917, Sam Mendes, past Oscar winner, war movie. It's a dependable genre. It's done really well. It's made really well, acted, all that other stuff. But it's a war movie and it's telling a very basic story. You know, it's these two men and they want to get from point A to point B, and in you know, amidst the war is hell of the, you know, the First World War. We get it. You know, this movie tells a story we've never seen in a way we've never seen it from a filmmaker. You know, again, it feels very similar to me. So both movies, like, I won't be disappointed if either of those wins, because I do like both of those movies, but I will be extra happy if Parasite gets that because of the statement that it makes, because because it pushes the needle forward in the industry, an industry that more than ever now, where, you know, people are talking about, well, where was Greta Gerwig's Oscar nomination? Why are there 19, you know, white people nominated for acting? When Lupita Nyong'o and Awkwafina are sitting right there, you know, why does Scarlett Johansson have 2 nominations? And then at the BAFTA, Margot Robbie, I think, also had 2 nominations. Like, it's like, why are we not past that yet? I mean, you know, I feel like Parasite sends a message of progress and steps forward, and 1917 would just be like, oh, we like that. It's the safe choice, you know, basically. And so that's why, I mean, and this happened with The Farewell, having this conversation, like, I feel like I appreciate Parasite more because we're delving into it more. And I'm like, damn, there's more to talk about with this. I feel like we've gone way over the time we were supposed to, and we started late, and I'm still like, I have no more notes, but I still feel like there's other things we're not talking about that as soon as we get off this call, I'm like,
oh, dang it, I forgot to mention this.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm very envious of anybody who's like in a film studies class right now who gets to like dissect this movie, because I'm sure that's going to be like so much fun to go into, like so many techniques used in constructing the movie, let alone the themes and actual content of the film, you know? But yeah, to speak on what you're saying, I completely agree with you. I think there is value in awarding something that is unique, but also obviously extremely well crafted and connected with people. Right. And so something like 1917, I think, you know, I know I've heard some people complain like, oh, it's a video game movie, like whatever. I can hear that criticism, but I still think that it was effective. I think it was something interesting, but it is kind of like, I take away the kind of one shot element, you know. It is a movie that we kind of have seen before. It's not like the most unique topic, you know, like it's still obviously a good movie, but something like Parasite, it's just the fact that it has so many layers and it all works and it's just constructed and so creative. It just feels like I can't think, as much as like we're comparing it to like Us or, you know, like Ready or Not. This movie is obviously very different in how much detail it goes into, right? And so it just feels like such a unique movie that it would be a shame if it wasn't recognized, in my opinion. I think you are way more reasonable being happy if 1917 wins. I will still be upset and mad.
I know how the Academy can let me down, so I'm like, well, yes. I'm like set at a certain level of disappointment. So if 1917 gets it and Joker doesn't, I'll be happy. Let's put it that way. Like, pretty much if any movie other than Joker gets it, I'll be better. I'll be happier. But it's
to speak of like the Moonlight moment, I was like, I always do like little Oscar parties and have like food and snacks. And so we're watching and they say La La Land. I was like, all right, okay, let's wrap it up. Let's get the food off the table. You know, I was already like, yeah, that was to be expected, blah, blah, blah. And then when all the stuff started to happen and it was like, oh no, it's Moonlight. I was like, oh, I was shocked. I felt like chills because I was like, no, I was not expecting them to pick that, even though I do agree. I think Moonlight deserves the best picture. Yeah. So like, I just was not expecting that. And so, it's one of those things where we'll see what happens, but I maybe because I've invested more time because I've talked about this movie now for so long that I'm kind of like, yeah, I really need Parasite to win everything. Like I'm just like,
yeah. And I think for a few years there, they were picking kind of interesting choices. And I think Moonlight was really the pinnacle of that. So it's like, to me, something like 1917 is a good movie. La La Land is a good movie. Moonlight and Parasite feel like they're trying to change the way movies are made. They're trying to change cinema and like I said, take it to the next level, like another stage of like more sophisticated storytelling. And I think, you know, it would be really encouraging if the Academy recognizes that, as opposed to, I don't know how you felt about it, but last year being like Green Book, sure. And I was like,
I was kind of like, what is happening? It felt like a step backwards in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
like even if you, regardless of how you feel about the movies, I mean, we had 12 Years a Slave, Birdman, Spotlight, Moonlight, Shape of Water, all interesting in varying ways. Most of those are in some kind of important movie. Like they have something to say. Whether it works for you or not is kind of beside the point. Green Book is like fine. It's fine at best, basically. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Problematic and downright offensive and horrific at worst. And that's not the range of storytelling we should be nominating for Best Picture, let alone giving it awards, including, I think it won screenplay for some reason. And I just like, oh, really? How did that happen? When The Favorite and movies that are much more interesting are out there, So I'm kind of worried that that's going to happen again. I guess that's why I'm like, 1917 at least is a happy middle ground.
Yeah, you're probably correct. I am kind of like, I'm really hopeful because I do feel like it I mean, we could go on a whole other tangent about like, sure. I today went on like, oh, what are my most anticipated movies? Because that's what we're going to release on our next episode. And I was kind of like, oh, this year I'm excited for some movies, but like, I remember a time when I was excited for so many movies. It felt like, oh my gosh, it's going to be crazy. Every month there's so many things. How am I physically going to see all these movies? It's going to be impossible. And obviously it's still January. Who knows what will surprise us? We don't know what's coming out yet. But last year I kind of felt like, oh, I'll never say, oh, it's a bad year for movies. But as far as like seeing movies that impacted me, that would make me feel like I'm going to think about this movie longer than a day, or it wasn't that many. And Parasite is a movie that I can't imagine not thinking about in the future, you know. Yeah. But something like Green Book, I imagine if you liked it, that's great. But I'm sure you don't think about it, you know. Like, I'm sure you're like, yeah, that was a movie, that's fine, right. You know. Like I can't like so. I think there is something to say about awarding something that is trying something new and succeeding. Obviously, you don't want to just give it for because then Cats would be nominated, right? Like they tried something.
Like they tried Digital Fur. Good job, Best Picture.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, but you know, I think Parasite tried something and they succeeded in the type of storytelling that they wanted to tell, and I really hope that this is the beginning of something new in filmmaking that makes people more daring and want to try something. Somebody who is like, you can't make someone believe that someone else has tuberculosis and do it in a smooth action scene. And then, you know, Parasite does it. And it's like, oh, maybe I could try something different like that. Right. Like it's insanely impressive. And if you're not even thinking, exactly. Yeah. If you're not even just thinking about the substance of the movie, just the way it's constructed is so impressive. But yeah, I hope it inspires people to try to be more creative and tell different types of stories. And honestly, watching this movie, you know, I think Bong Joon-ho has had a couple of things, like, I forget his exact quote when he's like, you know, you shouldn't be afraid of subtitles. Like, you can open your world. And it's like, that's something I hope a lot of people take to heart. Like, oh, wow, I guess there's like a whole thing, because to think about it, if you you don't live in America or like speak English, a lot of the Hollywood movies you're watching are with subtitles. That's how, you see this media, and that doesn't stop people. So that shouldn't stop us from absorbing that type of media.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, I just hope that it inspires people to try different things, because I'm really worried about like the types of movies we're getting lately. Like, I don't know. This year, I'm
you're
just
not
kinda
excited about the Bambi remake that Disney's doing? Apparently.
Yeah, that, which I'm shocked they're even thinking about doing that after Lion King. But then again, I'm not, because Lion King did financially so well that I guess it would be dumb for them not to do it, right?
Yeah, I guess.
That is depressing.
Sort of. What a downer. We're having talked excitedly about Parasite for an hour and a half, and now we're like, movies. We're all doomed anyway.
Yeah.
So, is there anything about Parasite that we haven't talked about that we want to mention? I guess without going into a whole other hour of analysis.
Sure. I mean, I can't really think of anything else. I'm sure there's tons of things that will be like, man, I should have mentioned this, but. I just think for me, it's a movie that like it made me really excited to do what I'm doing right now, which is just discussing movies. Like, this is just like, this experience talking to you has just been really fun. And I can't wait for more people to see Parasite so I could talk to them. It has been a movie that I'm like, I don't want to spoil it for you. So can you please watch it so we can talk about it? So like, I'm sure there's so much else to say, but like, I just really appreciate even having this conversation about this type of movie, because it was just so exciting to see and to dissect.
Yeah, no, agree. And I look forward to seeing what happens on Oscar night, and hoping that that we are able to unite our powers and will this into happening and when it comes to Best Picture. So we'll definitely watch that. And Sade Gilbert, can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Yes, I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Offscreen Babble. And you can also go to our website, offscreenbabble.com. Our podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Sade, thank you so much for taking the time and being patient with my lateness and going way over our allotted time to talk about
no worries.
this.
I'm sorry, listeners. I promise I am way more together most of the time, but it's hard to like keep it together with this movie, because I really think you could probably talk about this movie for like hours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll definitely we'll have to keep an eye out for something else to talk about. You're honestly one of my favorite guests to talk to on the show, and I think we just have such great conversations going back and forth and diving into these really interesting movies. And this was I think one of the great ones from 2019 to talk about and kind of dissect and dig into and tear apart all the little details. So. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll definitely have to find something else to give the Parasite treatment to, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.